while the download for Lumion is running and hopefully installing in time, if it doesn't install in time, then I'll just show you like a quick, because I did the intro video in like 15 minutes, so I'll show you from when I did it before. But in the interim, I'm going to explain your final project, which is this. So take a look at the pretty pictures I put in here. Ooh, yeah. Okay, and then here's the important part. So, what we're going to do is create an iconic structure. So the reason I chose these ones is, well, not so much that one. Don't look at the base of that one. But basically, the reason I chose these ones is because they're very lightly touching the ground, and they have this sort of futuristic aesthetic to them and character. So that's what I want you guys to be envisioning when you go through this assignment. And it doesn't have to be quite as complex as these, but it should capture some of the essence of it being something that sort of falls outside of the realm of reality. So basically, I don't need to read all that, but like the functions of a megastructure really can sort of capture a bunch of different qualities of a built space, right? So it can be a landmark for wayfinding from place to place. Like think back to the design of Paris and how there were these grand avenues that went from major monument to major monument as a method of not only finding your way around the city, but also intimidating others who may be, you know, trying to sack the city, right? So there's also questions of like population density, right? With these being mega structures, they have the capability of either housing or serving large populations at any given time. There's programmatic stacking, so you can look at the fact that any building that is so large can actually encompass a lot of different types of functions, not just one function, right? These super tall structures that you're seeing in major cities like New York, Dubai, Shanghai, they're all multiple programs. Like it's rare to find a super tall structure that has just offices, for instance. So you could also look at it as sort of a flagship for cultural identity if it's like a national monument in a way. Some of them are kind of moving into the idea of like utilizing it for vertical farming. So you'll see a lot of renderings of, especially in something like the Evolo skyscraper competitions, they like to do sort of ecological and environmentally friendly concepts. Some other ones are like stuff like energy generation, which you can use these sort of futuristic structures to harness energies in ways that are not yet possible, right? But can be fun to explore academically. And then events or transportation hubs, and even something like defense of space or defensible space. So that's kind of like the general ideas of these megastructures that I want to be floating around in your head as you're starting to develop a concept. But let's look at what you're going to do. So first up, I mentioned that you guys are actually going to be sketching. And that's critically important. We're going to develop a design party diagram. And so that's kind of like your first step, which is saying, like, oh, maybe I want my tower to look like League of Legends. And so, like, you're going to do this sort of bifurcation of, like, two separate things, right? And then you're going to start to look at, like, well, how do I connect these things at different nodes or something, you know? And you kind of develop that as, like, a diagram or something, right? Whatever it is, explore it. So then the diagram sort of serves what you're going to build, right? So after the diagram, you need to think about your architecture, and you can get a little pictorial in a way, because if you're looking at something like this, well, maybe it's not just these, like, you know, a square and a circle, but maybe it's more like, you know, these volumes that are sort of competing with one another. Right, they're two totally different volumes, but they have to be connected in some way, right? So you're now looking at sort of the quadrality of, you know, these pieces, and you're starting to look at, well, what if I have fenestration that's connecting, right? And if it's connecting, what is the connection method? So you're looking at these things from like a pictorial perspective. Well, like what is the architecture? And that looks super lame, so don't do that. But after that, start to look at how you're going to build it, right? So if you've got your concept diagram and then you start to develop like sort of massing and you kind of understand what the massing is, well then start to look at the architecture. So, or like what I mean by that is, well maybe my diagram starts to take on a more point, line, and plane look, and this can actually happen in sequence. So I'm going to kind of draw like a few of them down here, but like let's start with this is my structure, and then I have a series of other elements, right? Whatever they are. Like that's like my first diagram. I know some of you can't really see that up there, but I hope that wasn't loud on the video. And then you can start to look at like, well, if I have these pieces, well, what happens if my arms are dipping low or if they're going high? Maybe arms that are dipping low have architectural elements that are actually heavy and feel like it's weighing it down, but ones that are up top maybe aren't. So like that one is possibly something that looks like this, and this one is possibly something that looks like that. Right? Like you're looking at it in terms of just like an analytical diagram of like what is it, how might I build it. So are these going to be like pods? Are they going to be different forms of one mass? Are they going to be something that integrates with the architecture below? So maybe these pull back and start to integrate with that, and then it's like a bifurcation of one space to another, right? So like all that stuff is stuff that you can explore via like a growth diagram. So if you're doing that, then like the next step is, well, what are these pods? Are these pods going to be panelized? Right? Because if they're going to be panelized, then what are the panels? Right? Do they breathe? Are they going in and out? And so if they are going in and out, then start to look at it in terms of an exploration like this. Right? Are they triangulated? And then if they're triangulated, what's the pattern? Right? All that stuff is the conversation that you should be developing. This is how you get to an architecture from a concept. Does that make sense? You're all looking at me with very blank stares. Okay, this will be an iterative process. I would say like you're going to hand in your sketches on the 22nd, and we're going to take a look at them together, and I'll comment on them, and we'll kind of I think we'll kind of do like a general sort of pin-up-y kind of chat, and it won't really be like you guys are presenting, but we'll just talk about the nature of diagramming, and maybe I'll kind of give you guys some ideas for how to improve them. And then that weekend you can work on improving them and getting your architecture more fleshed out. So that's the idea I have behind our schedule. So then you're going to create a series of thumbnail diagrams. That's those, right? And the objective is, this is how I'm going to build my architecture. Okay, this is the architectural quality of the building. I have the conceptual quality of the building right there. This is the architectural quality, okay? So they're two separate things. And then due on the 10th, which is Monday, that's our final, is a rendering. So you're going to hand in a rendering and 2 sheets of sketches, or 3 if you so desire. I think that's on the next page, actually. Down here. 2 pages, 3 if necessary. So basically you're going to show your rendering, and then you're going to have 2 sheets for your sketches. So you could have one sheet if all of your sketches fit on one, or you can do your design partie sketch on one sheet, and you can do your sort of iterative process sketches on another sheet. Is that clear? Okay. You're still looking at me with very blank stares.
What's the look, Kevin?
I haven't even told you like the design assignment yet.
I think that it's gonna get more.
Just the deliverables is a lot?
Make the rendering only 1, and
Yeah.
the concept page only 1 page.
It's a rendering and sketches. That's all I've told you so far. That's a lot.
Little thumbnails.
All right.
What's not a lie?
Yeah, right? Anyway, So let's talk
I
about
know that you're gonna be late on this.
let's talk about this, guys. It's actually a very simple design assignment, which you guys should listen to me very carefully when I say that, because it is truly very simple, right? When I say that and when I present assignments like this, you guys have a tendency, well, historically, by you guys, I mean former students, have a tendency to overcomplicate it, okay? This doesn't need to be like your design assignment, okay? So all I want to see is that you've developed a simple conceptual idea and you've executed it, right? You've gotten it to a point where you created a building-like element out of it, okay? That's it. And by building-like element, really, it's not even a building. It's just a structure. It's a thing. So like, don't overthink it. Think in like a very raw fashion about the concept, and then focus on the process. Okay. So let's start talking about it. Might freak you out a little bit, but I guarantee you it's simple. Okay. So I wrote down the floor is lava, right? That's kind of the inspiration behind this. Is like, we're going to create a building that doesn't really touch the ground, in a way, sort of, kind of. And what I mean by that is, if you kind of jump down in the requirements, it's a 700,000 square foot building, give or take 10%, within 10% of that, so give or take 5%. And the building can only touch the ground at, in a matter of about 20,000 square feet. So a maximum of 20,000 square feet can touch the ground, which means it's only about an area of like 140 feet by 140 feet. Okay, so it's a relatively small footprint. It's about the width of a short side of a New York City block, and it runs pretty tall. Well, I mean, if it's a perfect rectangle, it doesn't have to run that tall, but hopefully it's not a perfect rectangle. Anyway, so you're going to create those little testing analysis features, and as you're developing this thing, you can tell whether or not it's within bounds, right? So, I mean, like, do that early so that when you're developing your massing and you're kind of looking at your floor plate sizes and all that stuff, that it works, because I am going to check it. But, like, all right, so let's jump back, right? So the floor is lava. You're going to provide a fairly robust base, right? And it should kind of, it should support a structure above it, right? So I don't want you guys to think like, okay, you said 140 feet, so this is 140 feet here. And then I'm going to do floor, 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 times however many I need to get 700,000. Don't do that. That's just lame. Challenge yourselves, right? Like, think of something creative. And it's not even really that much of a challenge, but challenge yourself to think beyond the obvious, like, nothing response, because that's a nothing response. But develop a concept. Don't think about the technical challenge before you develop the concept. So, like, if, let's say, for instance, you wanted to create, and I'm going to keep going on the pod thing, right? So, like, what if these pods were actually sort of habitable air balloons that float in the clouds and collect water directly from the clouds instead of allowing precipitation to get dirty as it hits the ground, right? So it's the same thing, except you change this diagram to go up. Right? So that is not that, and this is more fun to challenge yourself to build, is it not? Anyway, I think it is. So that's what I would like from you, is to challenge yourselves not to just do an extruded rectangle. So robust-ish base. The spaces may not touch your defined ground plane. So you will define a ground plane that, like, and it'll have context. So, like, there will be buildings or mountains around it, whatever you want. But just kind of pretend like that ground plane is radioactive. Like, no habitable spaces will touch that ground plane, if that makes any sense. So, like, what that means is, if you have a base down here, and that base grows into your building, then that base doesn't count toward your square footage. And then making sure that you're providing infrastructure accommodations to for air travel. because you can't touch the ground, so like nobody's going to be driving a truck or a car up to your building. So they're all going to be flying to your building. So how are they going to do that? They're going to have their little Jetsons vehicle. Right, and it's going to be like, right, it's like a little jet. And then you're going to have to provide somewhere for it to go. So if it's like a giant fishing net, right, maybe it looks like this, and you're creating these little giant fishing nets. Right, and then they go, and they get caught, right? So whatever the idea is. Looks fun to me, but anyway, so you could do something like that if you wanted, but like have fun with it. But just make sure that you're providing some accommodations for air travel. There are no safety rules here. Just needs to sort of look cool. And then, okay, so when you're doing your floor divisions, I want you to stick to like a 12 to 15 foot floor height. And I'm kind of counting on that relatively low floor to floor height, on there kind of being a pretty significant separation between the ground plane and the building, but it doesn't have to be. So like these, maybe all the way up in the clouds, but they're going to have these tiny little floors at 12 to 15 feet. And that's what you're going to count toward your square footage. Okay. And then negative spaces, that's all just logistical stuff. Like it doesn't have to be one big tower, right? It can have negative space, meaning like it can bifurcate, it can kind of like split and come back into itself. It can just have voids in the volumes, whatever you want to do to it, do to it. Do it to it. Yeah, and then the square footage stuff. So that's really like all your requirements is that it can't touch the ground, right? It should be a little space agey. And we're going to let the concept drive the design.
Nice. Why it doesn't need to touch the ground?
Because that's the challenge I gave you.
I know, but what was the reason?
So the reason is because I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to do a rectangle.
Make a futuristic building that touches
Well, I mean, it will touch the ground. You have 140, or you have 20,000 square feet that you can use to engage the ground, but you can't have any habitable space on the ground. Okay? All right. Cool. So that's still going. Anyway, what questions do you have about this? If there's not a single question, I'll be quite concerned. Yes?
Can I go underwater?
Yeah, in theory. A rendering underwater is kind of difficult, but yeah, I'm okay with it. Have you guys seen that Snowhead building that's like the restaurant that's underwater?
Like a rectangle?
Oh, yeah. You guys got to see this. It's another, so like this is a really simple building that actually has that space agey thing, but they actually built it and it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's real. Yeah, I am. So this is in the video, but yeah. So they Snowhead. Yeah, they actually built this thing. So it's like this giant brick that just fell into the ocean, and this is what it looks like inside. It looks amazing. It's super cool.
Where's that from?
I don't know where it is. Norway. So, anyway, think space agey and futuristic like this. So yes, Chase, your mind is in Chance. Chase. I've known you for a whole year and I called you Chase. I called you Chase. Anyway, so think space agey and just kind of get your mind out of like the box, right? These aren't really like buildings. They're, well, yeah. Okay. Hecklers. Okay. So anyway, what other questions do you have? No other questions.
So like, can I? What if we don't? I
Hands, please.
I'm about building this like floating on space, like outer space.
If you want to, sure. Yeah, like look at these examples. The one in the top right corner doesn't even touch the ground.
That looks like a jellyfish.
Yes, it does. Pat, you had a question too? Okay. Do you have a question? Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. So let me see about this Lumion thing, and then we'll see if I'm just showing you another video or something.